Hi, folks. So, our guest today is a distinguished figure in product management. He's renowned for his impactful contributions to the tech industry. As founder of the Silicon Valley Product Group, he's played a pivotal role in shaping modern product development practices. With over 4 decades of experience, he's worked with top tech companies, bringing innovative strategies and insights to product teams worldwide. He's a celebrated author. I know from my own experience, Inspired is one of the books that inspired me to become a product manager. And I know it's the same for many other product managers around the world. And Empowered, of course. And his latest book, Transformed, offers deep insights into effective product development methodologies. He's a well respected speaker, advisor, and his expertise is often sought after globally. So delighted to welcome Marty Cagan. So, hi, Marty, how are you doing?
I'm good, David. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thanks again for your time. And yeah, I know you've done lots of podcasts and interviews recently. And again, congratulations on the launch of the new book. And that's really where we'll start off. We'd love to know a bit more about it, in terms of kind of what it's about and how it's different from your previous two books.
Sure. Well, it is definitely different. Inspired was really for product teams. Product managers got a lot of attention because they're usually the weakest link on a team, but product teams was inspired. And then Empowered was for product leaders. And that's really why we wrote those books, why we started SVPG, to share the techniques. However, it's also true, but not a surprise really to anybody, that starting with Inspired, which really was 2008 was the first edition. So for a long time, as soon as Inspired came out, there were people that would reach out to us and say, we wish we could work like this, but our company is so far away. And people would say things like, is it possible to change to work like this? Are there examples of companies that have changed to work like this? I know maybe Amazon works like this and Stripe works like this, but they were born this way. What about our old company that's 50 years old and it's never worked this way? So that's really what my partners and I do, is help companies to change to this way. So it wasn't really a surprise for us, but so much of the world just doesn't know how to change and didn't know if it was possible. And in fact, a lot of people, and I think a lot of people that should have known better, but there were a lot of people that would say they don't think it's possible. And of course, this book was meant to address that. So unlike the books Inspired and Empowered, which are the techniques of teams and leaders, Transform was meant to share the techniques of actually transforming, what's actually involved in a change. And we made a rule for ourselves where none of the examples would be Silicon Valley companies, because that's too easy. So all the examples from all over the world, from the Middle East, from Brazil, from Europe, from all over, other than Silicon Valley, and in all kinds of industries, healthcare, financial, regulated industries of several forms. So we wanted to have a definitive answer. First of all, yes, it is absolutely possible to change. You can read about their stories. These are all the real names, all the real people. You can look them all up. So no more of these people saying it's impossible. You may not want to do it. I don't blame, that's fine. But it's not really true to say it's impossible. So that was the point of the book. And yeah, so the other thing I guess we should say is we're the first ones to say transforming is hard. And so we felt it was important in the book to take all these objections we've been hearing forever, and we're talking legitimate objections from finance, from marketing, from sales, from customers, from your own teams, and say, look, here are legitimate objections. You will probably hear some or all of these objections, and here's how we respond to those objections. So a lot of people have told me that the most useful things for them out of the new book is the case studies, and that really are meant to inspire confidence that it is possible. And then the objection handling, so that they have the words to go back to their CEO or their CFO and say, this is how it's done in this model.
I love it, Marty. And then, like, with that, with some of these objections and stuff, an awful lot of transformations, I think it's like 70% of all transformations fail. Why do you think that is? Is there one golden thing that you think people should take home, or other than just read the book, maybe?
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully they're motivated to read the book. By the way, I don't even know if it's 70%, but I believe it's very high. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 90% that failed, because almost every company that we're invited into to help with the transformation, they've already tried at least once and failed. So I don't know what the real number is. I don't know if nobody wants to publicize that. We have written what we think is the root causes of most failed transformations. And but you asked what's at the top. I would say at the top of the list, the most common reason is because people are looking to the wrong places for guidance on how to transform. And I see them looking at two different places. One is the Agile people. Now, don't get me wrong, Agile plays a role if it's real Agile, not fake Agile, of course, but it plays a role, but it's a small part of a role. The way we define a transformation, it's only one of the three major areas. And even then you can do Agile and not do the things you need to do. So you need to go further than Agile. But, of course, if you go to a bunch of Agile coaches or Agile consultancies, they don't know. Most of them have never worked in a product company. So you're not going to find the answer there. The more common problem is that the CEO, if you ask yourself, who does the CEO trust? It's usually their business school friends. And so they call McKinsey, they call Bain, they call BCG, they call the big consultancies. And they say, can you help us? And don't get me wrong, just like with Agile coaches, there are very smart people in a lot of these companies, but most of them have never done this before. So we still see it today, McKinsey out there preaching things from 20 years ago because they don't know any better. They literally don't know any better. So I think the root cause is, where do people go? If you believe you're under threat, let's say from an Amazon or from a Stripe or from wherever, and you believe you have to change how you work, who do you turn to for help? And that's, I think that's a big problem. And just to be clear, we're only a few people. We can't help the majority of people. So we thought the way to do that is, share what we've learned in a book. And also, we've been busy building a network of product coaches. Not that we have no financial ties with any of them. We don't do any bogus certifications or anything like happens in the industry. But if somebody asks us for a product coach that's been there, done that, we have a list of people that we think are good, and we'll recommend them. And in the book, in fact, I think one of the most important sections describes what you should look for in a coach. Cool. And first and foremost is somebody that's actually been there, done that. So if they haven't been there, done that, don't hire them as a coach.
Excellent.
Yeah, it sounds like such an obvious thing, but unfortunately, it's very prevalent, I think, in the industry. You mentioned real versus, I suppose, the idea of fake Agile, and I know in the book you mentioned maybe something similar, product management theater. What are you noticing, I suppose, in the industry around that kind of maybe fake product management or whatever way you would describe it? What are you seeing there?
Well, the fake Agile is kind of a different thing than the theater, although some people do call it Agile theater. But just to be very clear, if you're releasing every month or every quarter, you're not Agile. Just don't fool yourselves. That is just not Agile. You may be doing all the rituals, but you're not Agile. You're not getting any of the basic benefits of Agile. So that's what we mean by Agile theater. Product management theater is another problem. And I honestly think this is a incredibly frustrating one. And yeah, you're alluding to these articles I published recently. It's not in the book, by the way, but it's after the book came out. I've been talking about this idea of product management theater, and what inspired that article was one of the biggest, today all over the world, there are these organizations that claim to certify you as a product manager, or worse, as a product owner. And one of the biggest published an article recently that was forwarded to me, and I couldn't believe what they were saying, because it was exactly the problem, right in a nutshell. They were defining what they think a product manager is supposed to do. And this is one of the biggest organizations for certifying these people. And I'm reading this saying, I can't believe they wrote this, said this out loud. This is exactly the problem with our industry. This is not product management at all. This is project management.
Right.
And this is why so many companies are frustrated with their product managers. This is why so many engineers are frustrated, so many CEOs are frustrated. And so that's what's referred to as product management theater. Now, whose fault is that? I don't blame the people that have been trained in that. Usually their manager sent them to this training. So I do blame the managers. The managers are supposed to know what it takes. And so if they don't do their homework and they send them to some ridiculous program that's absolutely useless for what they need to do, then that's their fault. But regardless, it's created quite a mess. And it's also no secret that there's already been the start of a backlash against these people, because so many people in the company, starting with the product teams, are saying these people are just not helpful.
Right. Mm-hmm. And for someone in that situation, Marty, how would they let go of project management duties? How do they correct themselves?
No, it's easy. If you transform and you get serious, we say get serious about product. What that really means is move from feature teams to empowered product teams. Right. If you decide to do that, then you need somebody to play the role of a real product manager. Now, sometimes those feature team project managers are able to learn. A lot of times they are able to learn, but not all the time. Especially more of a problem actually with product owners. This is more of a, there's problems in the US, there's problems in Europe. In Europe, one of the big problems is sort of product owners. They think that's a job. It's not. It's a tiny part of the product management job. And so there's a lot of frustration there, and a lot of learning that has to be done to raise your game. But to your question, yes, they need to stop playing project manager and start playing product manager. The irony is most of these companies, almost all of them, have at least one real kind of project manager there. Right. They might be called delivery managers, project managers, program managers, but the product managers need to offload the project management so they can focus on the product management. And really, most people, if they get somebody who's been there, done that, their manager or a product leadership coach, in a few months, they can learn the skills that are necessary to do that job.
Cool. Very good. That's useful. Thank you.
Just maybe slightly related that, I think one of the things when I was training to be a product manager that was eye-opening was things like learning about pricing, learning how sales works, things like that. Would you say there's a whole kind of raft of things there maybe that people aren't aware of in terms of kind of what that product manager role really should look like?
You're getting right at it. Basically, if you're going to be a serious product team responsible for delivering outcomes, not just shipping features, then you definitely need designers and you definitely need engineers. That should not be a surprise. What is a surprise to most is that you need somebody that understands value and viability. Value is really customer value. They will choose to buy you. We have good techniques for measuring that. This is on the product manager. But the bigger one, and this is what you're getting at, David, is viability. Which viability is really value for your company. That means things like it's something you can afford to market. It's something you can afford to build. It's something you can monetize. It's something you can sell with the sales channels you have, the go-to-market channels you have. It's something that's legal. It's something that's compliant. It's something that respects the privacy laws. This is what a product manager brings to the table. Who else is going to bring this to the team? The designers don't know this. The engineers don't know this.
Yeah.
So if you want an empowered, self-contained product team that can make good decisions, you need somebody that knows how your business works. That's viability. And you have to somebody who really knows the customers and the buyers. That is value. So that's the product manager's job. And obviously, if they're spending their day administering a backlog, or if they're spending their day playing project manager, then who's figuring this stuff out? And that's sort of where it falls down. A lot of teams have been saying for a long time that they want more responsibility. They want more real empowerment. But unless they provide those skills, they don't have the tools they need to do the job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's interesting. One thing, just maybe to follow up on that, I was curious about. So Gen AI, I know you've talked a bit about Gen AI recently. How do you see that impacting that, that product owner role, or the backlog administrator, or that type of role? Do you think Gen AI actually might push that away, or how do you see it impacting kind of product management?
To me, it's not a question of if today, it's a question of when. I'm already seeing tools that are doing this, but now they're trying to, see how good they are and productize this. In fact, I'm not the only one. The most likely, these things automate from the bottom up, just like for design or just like for engineers. So a lot of the communication stuff, a lot of the backlog administration stuff, you would not want that to be the center of your career. You're very vulnerable if that's your contribution. Of course, what we really hope is if product managers are focusing on value and viability, that's the high order contribution. And the administrative work, we can become more productive if you've got better tools for managing those things. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've never met a product manager that enjoyed their time in Jira every day. Nobody does. They have to do it, right? We all have to do it. Have you met any engineers that like their time in Jira? No, right? Nobody does, but we have to do it because we've got to sort of manage the chaos of tickets and changes and be able to know, well, this change is in this release and stuff. So we need this stuff, but it's a pain. But it's not like higher order thinking. It is, very administrative. And this is a perfect thing for technology to help with. And so I think we're in the very early days, and I'll go on. I know that I'm overly optimistic by nature. I'm one of those people that I see a prototype and I think in 6 months we're all going to have this, and 2 years later we're just barely getting it. So things take longer than I usually think they will take, just to get all done and productized and working well, and then people have to buy it and be trained on it. Those things take a long time. And that assumes Gen AI technology is fairly mature, and it's not. It's very nascent. So there's a lot of issues being worked out, as people build these solutions. But I do think the longer term seems pretty clear there. We're already seeing it with real benefits for the engineers. That's the part I like the best today. Engineers are becoming significantly more productive, and that has big implications for product teams. So, that's a clear win. Design, it's starting to happen, and product management, it's starting to happen.
And with those changes then, Marty, looking back at where you've come from, I mean, I see that you originally studied computer science and economics. If you were to go back in, and I don't know if you teach undergrads or deal with them, where we've gone from, even through all of our careers, is hugely different from where we started off with. Like, is there anything you'd recommend to the undergraduates that, in what you're seeing, would you say don't focus on managing a backlog anyways?
What's really funny is I did study computer science, but what's less well known is when I studied computer science, you would have to pick a specialty, and the specialty I picked was artificial intelligence. So AI was what I studied and this is I graduated in like 1981 with that, so it is so old. But and of course, it's in one way, you're pointing out, Rob, how much things have changed. That kind of points out how little things have changed, really. It just took 40 years to really happen.
Yeah.
But
I didn't expect that answer.
I know. But in some ways, things have changed dramatically. In other ways, it's funny because I'm really interested in two things when it comes to how we build products. I'm interested mostly in the principles.
Right.
That's what the new book tries to highlight, the principles, because principles to me are lasting. And it's fascinating to me because I was looking in the creation of the book Transformed, where we wanted to highlight the principles we see in the best companies. And then I was asking myself, how many of those principles was I taught when I first learned? Most of them. The principles have actually not changed much. But the other thing I'm really interested in are the techniques.
Right.
And the techniques are like there's nothing that I was taught that we still use. The techniques are better across the board. So the techniques have changed dramatically, but the principles really haven't. The principles have just, they shine a light on what's really important. Like even one of the very first things I learned was prototyping and experimentation. Right. I'm still trying to convince more companies to do that 40 years later.
Yeah. We learned this AI thing back in college, and you should try it along with this. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, no, I think again, a lot of people talk about it like it's a brand new thing, but it has been around, quite a while. Marty, one thing you mentioned, that switch to accountability for outcomes rather than outputs for empowered product teams, and really, I suppose, being results focused. What responsibilities do you see change, not just for product managers there, but particularly for developers and designers who are maybe more used to, we ship this on time, it's successful, we throw a party, move on to the next thing. How do you see their responsibilities changing, with that kind of shift towards focusing on outcomes?
Yeah, it is. Kind of at the highest level, that's what it's really about, is just moving from output to outcomes. And the truth is, most engineers I know, and definitely the designers I know, this is what they studied in school. They learned computer science because they wanted to solve problems for people. They learned real product design because they wanted to create great experiences for people. So they are rarely the problem. Sometimes they have been conditioned with 10 years of taking orders, and now they're being told you actually have a bigger job, and so it takes a little time for them to wrap their heads around that. But I don't really find much problem with engineers and designers. However, for the product manager, it's a completely different job because of this point we were talking about. When it's all about shipping features on a roadmap on time, that's project management for the product manager. But when it's all about solving problems, achieving outcomes, now it creates the need for these new skills. And that's where the product manager comes in. And it is true that that is a big change. Mm-hmm. It's also true that not every product manager wants that responsibility. I mean, I have definitely met people who, once they learned what's required really for the product manager role, they're going like, that sounds like so much pressure. And it is. It's a lot more responsibility. You're on the hook for a result, not just shipping something. You can't point at stakeholders and say it's their fault. Mm-hmm. So that's true. Now, that that speaks to agency. Do people feel like they have the right to do that? And that gets to be a cultural thing in a lot of places. So this is an important discussion. This is the kind of coaching you have to do as a leader with your people to help them understand what's really meant by signing up for outcomes.
Right.
It's not for everybody, but I will say that most people that I know that do it would never go back. They'd absolutely never go back. That is why they do the job. That's why they wanted to do the job, solving problems. My partner Christian, if you've ever met Christian Idiotti, he likes to say, how lucky are we that we get to go solve problems for people as a career, and I think that's how a lot of us feel. We're there to solve problems.
And is there a particular background then, Marty, that you'd be looking at for those types of people? I mean, you're looking for the problem solvers of the world. Are they identifying themselves in the early stages of their career coming through engineering, tests, business functions? I don't know.
They come from everything. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a mindset. They come from everything. I do think, there's certain advantages that come with coming from technology. Mostly, I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset that anything is possible. We just have to figure out the solution, that kind of thing. It's a mindset. And you kind of learn that when you study the enabling technology. It's just like, will this technology help us solve that better? But they come from anywhere. My view is as long as you can get somebody who really, they do need a strong sense of agency. They also have to have that initiative to I will learn whatever I need to learn. That's something that you're hunting for in these people. And you're looking for people that feel like, there's always obstacles. We know that. It's never easy. Our job is to figure out ways around those obstacles. So nobody says this out loud, but there are some people that are just looking for the first sign that something's going to be hard, and then they run away from it. You're not looking for people like that. Because there's always reasons not to do something. The real question is, can you find ways to make it happen? So there's 100 ways to describe that personality: grit, perseverance, I'm losing my voice here, but problem solving. That's what we're looking for. I think you're looking for people that love to learn new technologies, and they love to get to know customers and solve real problems for real customers.
I get frustrated when people tell me that they're not technical, because to me that just, I think clothes are technical, and words are writing is technical. And so it's like, oh man, you're just telling me, back to your initiative point, you're just telling me that you're not willing to go out and learn that new whatever it is. Yeah, so that I really like that one.
Yeah. I suppose that maybe just to build upon that, the role of leaders as well in promoting that culture, because again, it is a cultural shift, and product leaders, how do they play a part in kind of cultivating that environment for agency, maybe safety, those type of things? From those best companies that you've worked with and studied, what's the role of a product leader in that situation?
Yeah, that's great. And this is a big topic in the book too, is look, the key to making this work really are the product leaders. And by product leaders, we mean the managers of engineers, of designers, of product managers. The reason they're the key is because they're the ones responsible for coaching the people to learn how to do these things. Now, if they came from a company, like one of the companies we highlight, I realize I'm conflating England and Ireland and what I'm about to say, but one of the companies we profile is Trainline, which is based in London, and they, that was not a company doing any of this stuff until they brought in a new CEO who brought in a new head of product and new head of technology, and the three of them got to work retraining their people, hiring new people, building a data team, all these skills. And then watching what they were able to do is amazing. I love telling that story in the book, because what they've done will stand up against any of the best tech-powered companies in the world. In fact, their work got the attention of Amazon. It got the attention of Google. They invited them to be speakers at their conferences. They attracted a lot more developers. It's like a beautiful example how you can take very ordinary old school company and turn it into something amazing.
Cool.
So, but the leaders are the key. They really are. Because the leaders are responsible for developing their people. The leaders are responsible for the strategic context. That's the product vision, the product strategy, the team topology. And the leaders are responsible for winning the hearts and minds of the executive team. So everything really depends on those leaders. Now, if they've done like Trainline and they brought in some leaders that had been there, done that, that's one answer. The other answer is you bring in a product leadership coach to help your leaders learn this. If you believe you have leaders that are strong but have never done it before, then a product leadership coach can be by their side for the first few months and show them how to coach their people, show them how to do a real product strategy. And that works as well. And several of the examples in the book are that model. But it seems to be you need one or the other. You either need to bring people in that know what they're doing, or you need to have a coach to help your people learn to know how to work.
You were mentioning about perseverance a couple of minutes ago, Marty, and one of my good friends, he was working in a big unicorn company. Actually, they started off quite small, but they grew and very successfully with the product mindset and approach like that. And he would have always joked with me that they were an overnight success that took 14 months to deliver. How did you, when you're working with companies, how would you set expectations so that if they're going down that journey, what kind of timelines, or would you even commit to one?
Oh, yeah. Well, we always try to set people's expectations. Now, the truth is the size of the company really does matter for this question. If they're small, it is so much easier. If they're a startup or just growth stage, we don't even count that usually as a transformation, because the truth is, like, I've gone into startups of 100 people, and in 1 week they could be awesome. One week, that's nothing. But 100 people is so much easier than a 10,000 person company. So if you're a medium or a large enterprise, then we usually say it's somewhere between 1 and 3 years. 1 and 3 years. Now, this is where it's important to double click though. 1 to 3 years before you can sort of declare victory.
Right.
If you use the techniques that we recommend, at least, which you'll see like in the book, we recommend strongly this concept of pilot teams. Those, you get some teams that are performing well very quickly in just weeks or months. But then for that to spread across a large company, all the divisions of a large company, all the business units of a large company, that takes years. So you kind of have to look at that bigger picture. But we do tell people measure it in years. And that's the truth. And those examples in the book, they were years for these big companies.
Yeah, and it's good to set those expectations and work with that. I
was just curious on the pilot team topic, Marty. Like, would you have any recommendations for organizations in terms of the composition of those pilot teams, to really give them the best chance of starting off on the right foot?
Absolutely. The concept of a pilot team comes from, there was a great book from years ago called Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, and it talks about this idea of the technology adoption curve, which is really something conceived of for our customers, and it applies to our customers. I know we've been teaching it for years. It's something very important, especially with consumer products. However, many years ago, we all realized that it applies inside large companies as well as at our customers. And what that really means is that some people in our company love change, some people in our company hate change, and most people are somewhere in the middle. And the concept of pilot team, it's like, think of it as your early adopter customers. they're the ones that want to try it. They don't need it to be all working perfect yet. They want to work it out, and then they are the example to the others. That's how we look for pilot teams. We look for people who really want to work this way. They want to learn this stuff, and we want to set them up for success to the degree we can. And then the rest of the company is encouraged to watch them, ask questions, observe, see what they're doing. See, is that something you'd like to do? Is there some objections you have? Let's get them out on the table. So pilot teams are a very non-threatening, gentle way to introduce some pretty dramatic differences to how a company works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A good friend of mine, I think we call it the Pied Pipers. They're almost like the Pied Pipers of the organization that, you know, other people are inspired by them and kind of, you know, want to follow. So I think that analogy with early adopters as well is particularly, you know, close to that as well. Just curious as well, in terms of, you know, we're talking about, you know, focusing on outcomes, focusing on results. In larger organizations where you're working at scale, and as much as we try to eliminate dependencies, you know, it's a fact of life for a lot of large enterprises when they're developing product to have dependencies. How do you see that working in, you know, some of the best companies in terms of that accountability for outcomes, maybe when there's a shared initiative that multiple teams are working towards? Have you seen any patterns that, you know, help teams in that type of situation?
Well, first of all, this is normal. Unless you're a really small startup, everybody has dependencies. Like you said, everybody has them. Now, we do try to minimize them, and architecture goes a long way. Team topology goes a long way. There's ways we have to minimize them, and we're incented to minimize those dependencies. But everybody has dependencies, really.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going away. And in these huge companies, I mean, if you look at Apple, there is no way Apple could get anything shipped without a whole team of excellent people to manage these dependencies. They're called program managers. They're called. So that's why I was saying every company has project managers. And I'm not saying you don't need project managers. I'm just saying that's a completely different job than product management. In fact, the irony is when you look at every product team, basically has every product team in the product model is responsible for both discovery and delivery. Discovery is what product managers focus on. Delivery is what project managers focus on.
It's simple as that.
Yeah, makes sense. Just in terms of, I suppose maybe just back to the topic of Agile, like what do you, or I suppose where do you see the product operating model? Like, do you see that as kind of a replacement for Agile? Like, you know, there's maybe some similar principles in there. You know, how do you see that working with Agile?
Yeah. Well, we have to separate Agile's principles as described, say, in the manifesto,
right,
and Agile's processes, which range from everything from Scrum and Kanban, which I consider good, reasonable delivery processes, to things that are just Agile in name only, like SAFe. So and that's where the fake Agile stuff comes from. Let's eliminate those things. If you look at the principles in the Agile manifesto, those principles, and by the way, those are delivery principles, and I think they're excellent ones. You'll find principles very consistent with those in the product model. Just like you didn't ask about this, but Lean Startup. Lean Startup, there are principles, because Lean Startup are discovery principles. You'll find those principles in the product model too. So the principles, like I said, are really what matters there. The techniques, and definitely, you know, the techniques, there's all kinds of discovery techniques, all kinds of delivery techniques, like continuous deployment is a delivery technique. I happen to think it's so much better than what we used to have. So dramatically better. And it yields better quality and better velocity. So it's a win-win for sure. It's just you have to do the work to do that. But this is this is kind of getting off on a tangent. but we try to tie everything in the product model back to outcomes.
Right.
And one of the things, if you're trying to prove outcomes, it implies that when you build anything and deploy anything, it needs to be instrumented. It needs to be monitored. It needs to, you have the ability to deploy it in an A/B test. Otherwise, you don't have the ability to prove outcomes.
Right.
So that's why a lot of teams, they say we're doing Agile, and I'm like, you're not doing any of these things. So you're releasing every quarter. You're not instrumenting those things. You don't have the ability to deploy. And so it's like, sorry, I realize you spent all this money on Agile coaches and on roles. You're not doing anything you need to do. Now, the good news is a lot of companies did this 20 years ago, so they're fine. Yeah. But too many companies, the whole process thing took over and they lost sight of the principles.
Yes, going back to that again. There's a lot of controversy, but where do you come down on it, Marty? Do you think Agile is dead?
No, not at all. We have to say, when people say Agile, we need to ask, do you mean the principles or do you mean stuff like SAFe? If you mean stuff like SAFe, I wish it was dead, but it's not. But if, I'm trying to understand. It used to be, 20 years ago when people said Agile, that meant something to all of us. Today, it could mean anything from good practices to terrible practices. Right. So I don't know what that means. But I do believe that the principles underlying Agile, I don't think we're ever going to go away from those. I genuinely don't. They have been principles for a long time, and I think they'll be a principles for indefinite future. So the principles are good. The problem is when process people take over and lose sight of those principles.
Mm-hmm.
I think SAFe is always a hot topic, and I think especially for product managers, it could be quite a painful topic as well, in my experience. What do you think SAFe and frameworks like that are optimizing for? Because it sounds like the outcomes are quite different.
It's not about outcomes, but and the thing is, so if we pull aside the cynical aspect, the cynical aspect is, why are they calling it Agile? They're calling it Agile for marketing purposes.
Right.
It's not Agile at all. I mean, just look at it. It is pure waterfall. We know how to do that. Now, that doesn't make it evil. It just makes it not Agile. That's all. So the real point is, processes like SAFe and StageGate and PhaseGate and general waterfall, those processes are optimized not for innovation. They're optimized for predictability.
Right.
And a lot of companies, if that's what they want to optimize for, then that's the choice. I don't know a single tech-powered company that's their priority. Their priority is not predictability. Their priority is outcomes. Mm-hmm. Which is another way of saying innovation. You need to innovate in order to achieve these outcomes. So we don't, do we care about predictability? Yes. But do we care about outcomes more? Yeah. The point is, if you just ship a feature but it doesn't solve the problem, that's a hollow victory. We don't care. In fact, a lot of the companies we work with like to frame this as the difference between time to market and time to money. Time to money is really what they're in business for. That's why they fund efforts, is to get an outcome. Money is shorthand for that outcome. Time to market is just the predictability part. And it's not that time to market isn't important. It is. And the irony is, if you use the techniques of the product model, you got a better likelihood of hitting that, not only, the outcome, but also the date. But that's another discussion. But the point is, that's the focus.
Yeah, I think that sounds like an important distinction: time to money versus time to market, because they are two different things.
So just going back, it's a little bit more product owner than product manager, Marty, but it is related. So I'm doing an awful lot of research at the minute with in my spare time with a university here in Ireland, and we're looking at historic Jira projects. So mostly with companies in the product or agile space, and an awful lot of cases, the Jira projects. Again, you have to be careful how you phrase it. They have more arrivals, or work is arriving into them much faster than the teams are able to deliver. Is this a product manager, product owner failure? Like, have you seen it, and what would you do?
Can you clarify what's a Jira project?
So exactly, it's a really good clarification. So Jira themselves, Atlassian, say they should never have called it. It's basically the bucket. So if you set up a thing for all the work to flow into, it's called a project, and then you can, from that you can create, like, that's where all the tickets are created. So
So you're just saying that first of all, we should acknowledge almost the whole world uses Jira, right?
Yeah.
So everybody uses Jira as their ticketing system. There's some obviously new systems that are very promising, but the majority of the world is using Jira. So work is always going into that. And
Yes.
It's always been true that there's going to be way more work than capacity to do it. Always. That has never not been the case, and I don't think it ever will be the case.
Right.
So I'm not even sure that's always been true. The
Right.
nature of product is to decide what of that stuff should be done, if anything, by the way. Sometimes the right solutions are not in Jira yet. It has not been requested. Because the reason it hasn't been requested is because the people making the requests don't know what's just now possible. So anyway, I'm not sure really the nature of, if you're just observing that there's a lot more work to be done than there's time to do it, that's always been true and always will be true.
Okay, that's really interesting. No, thanks very much.
Marty, final question from my side. Product ops, that's a topic we see trending in our community at the moment. What's your take on it? And do you see any potential anti-patterns as well to product ops?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. Honestly, I didn't even know it was a thing in Europe until just very recently. So my first question, and just to be clear, in the new book, it actually makes a pitch for product ops. It encourages product ops. However, it pitches one flavor of product ops. Today, unfortunately, whenever anybody asks me about product ops, I have to say, first, you have to tell me what you mean by product ops. Because we have found 6 different definitions out there of product ops. We documented those, we shared those, and said, these are the 6 we see. Some of them we think are very helpful. Some of them we think are serious problems, anti-patterns, and a couple of them, honestly, don't make any difference. They're harmless. You do it if you want, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So that's, so we have to know, which do you mean by that? In Europe, I have not got a straight answer on that. And I just learned that there are at least one group based in the UK that kind of considers themselves a product ops group. And I read how they define product ops, but it was such an incompetent definition, I can't even tell what they were saying. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
So this was number 7, but it barely counts.
Well, I don't think so. I think it was one of the 6, but It was so poorly written, I couldn't even tell which one they were trying to describe.
Yeah, I think it goes back to having that shared understanding of what we mean when we're talking about some of these words. Marty, sorry, if it's a good definition, you have to just ask, so what are they trying to do with it? Because there are good definitions of product ops, and there are not so good definitions. So it's really hard to address it. And I do think it's incumbent on the community that wants to call themselves product ops to be very clear
about what they're proposing and what the benefit is. I will tell you the big thing I'm nervous about globally is product ops being used as yet another way, just like product ownership is, to have an assistant product manager.
Right.
That if I'd be genuinely fearful for my job if I was one of those assistant product managers. Even the product managers are under threat, like I said at the beginning. So if you're an assistant to one of those people, you know, you're probably at the top of the list at your company for if money gets tight.
Absolutely. Marty, this hour has flown by, so we will let you go. Thanks so much again for your time and for the discussion. Just in terms of a couple last things, where can folks find out about the Transform book, and is there anywhere they can reach out to you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, well, you can find the book at any retailer, and it's svpg.com is sort of where to reach us and where to see. You can see all the books and there's several 10 translations underway right now. So if you're listening from Europe and looking for different language, that's coming. But yeah, and also we keep the other thing that's probably worth mentioning. I mentioned that we handle these objections, but we also knew that in the book there's a large section on the objections. But we knew that once the book was published, we'd get other questions, and so there is an article, which is a living article on the site called Transformed FAQ, and we have added a bunch of. In fact, one of them was, what about product ops? So we put that there. It's already in the book, but we put it in that article because a lot of the people we feel that have that question are not going to read the book. So we wanted them to be able to see the answer. So this question is there, and lots of other questions, about 10 or 15 of them have been added so far. So, and I mentioned that because if you do have questions, you could look there. But also, if you have a question that you don't see in the book, you should email us because I will add that.
Perfect. So we will add links to our community page as well, where people can see more of that. So thanks very much, Marty. Rob, anything else from yourself?
No, that was absolutely brilliant, Marty. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed that. I could have stayed here all night asking questions.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me back. Hope people think it's useful.
Cheers, folks.